long time, they worshipped often under the cover of darkness in people's homes in England, and it was illegal what they were doing, and they were getting arrested. After the arrest of about 4 of their leading church members, they realized that they needed a better system, that what they were doing wasn't working. They had to come up with something better.
I am a pilgrim on my journey.
So for 12 years, they lived in Holland. They moved to Holland and lived there, where they were able to worship freely. However, after 12 years, their children started growing up to be Dutch children. The Pilgrims were perfectly happy being English subjects. It was only the fact that they couldn't worship freely that made them leave England. So having little Dutch children was a problem for them. So at that time, they came up with a scheme to come across the Atlantic, found a new colony in the area controlled by England. So they would still be English subjects, but they would be far enough away from the crown that they would be able to worship freely. And that's exactly what they did. They purchased one ship called the Speedwell, and they leased another ship called Mayflower. They were set to leave England in July of 1620. They had boarded the boats and they went to leave. But after leaving the harbor, the Speedwell started taking on water. So both ships had to turn back into harbor to repair that boat. They left in early September 1620. Now I want you to imagine what the conditions on the ship must have been like at that time. Again, sealed below deck 66 days. 102 people, no bathrooms below deck, no showers below deck. They weren't sailors, so a lot of people were getting sick during the journey. And also, because this was supposed to be a settlement, they brought along with them animals to start their settlement. So there were goats and pigs and chickens. People brought pets. There was a mastiff. There were dogs on board. A mastiff, which is a very big dog. There were also cats on board, but cats weren't as pets. What were the cats there for? Rats and mice. So 102 people, no showers, no bathrooms, people getting sick. Mice, cats, rats, dogs, pigs, goats, chickens, all living below deck, sealed below deck for the majority of that 66-day voyage. You can imagine how horrendous the living conditions down there must have been.
Welcome aboard the Mayflower 2. Look how tall it is down here. They put wheels on the cannon so you can slide it from side to side on the boat.
They used a lot of pulleys called tackle on the Mayflower. They were blocks of wood with ropes to lift heavy loads. If it was real heavy, they added blocks of wood and more rope to spread out the weight. We found pulleys all over the ship. See if you can spot any. Even below deck. The families on the ship had their own tiny cabins for sleeping. They were really just wooden bunk beds enclosed with curtains. Most of the single men slept in hammocks. They kept their food in chests or baskets. They even brought armor in case of hostile natives. But it was a very hard journey, and 2 people died on the way.
About halfway across the Atlantic, the ship got caught in a storm and the main beam of the ship broke. And luckily the passengers brought with them a tool with which the crew could use to fix that beam. However, during the time that they spent fixing the beam, all the currents and all the trade winds were blowing them back towards England. So they were getting delayed even further, even more. And once the ship was repaired, the master of the ship told them that the ship could make it. The ship could make it to the New World if they wanted to continue. However, it was up to them to decide, because at this point they knew they were arriving in the middle of winter. There was no getting around that. They knew that they would be arriving in the middle of winter. Do you want to continue? The leaders of the Pilgrims debated amongst themselves, and they did decide that the freedom that they were seeking in the New World wasn't more important than the risk that they were facing. So they did decide to continue on.
When they finally spotted land, they realized they had sailed off course. They were supposed to be farther south on the Atlantic coast in northern Virginia. But when they had tried sailing around Cape Cod, they had problems with the shore being too shallow and bad weather. So they decided just to stay in Plymouth Rock. But they wanted to make new rules to govern themselves because the ones they brought with them were for Virginia. They were afraid some people would say those rules didn't matter since they weren't in Virginia. So they signed the Mayflower Compact and made Plymouth their new home. After the Mayflower anchored in Cape Cod, they split into two groups, one to stay on the ship and the other to explore the area for a good place to build their colony. The explorers shoved off each morning in a small rowboat they brought with them on the Mayflower, rowing to shore and stepping out in the freezing water to haul the boat onto the sand. Then they explored or worked each day in the bitter cold of December and rowed back to the Mayflower at night. On board, they could only light small fires to cook with, not warm enough to dry their heavy clothes, and the situation on board the Mayflower was little better for the women and children who must have huddled together to keep warm. One day, they met a group of Indians who shot arrows at them. They named the spot First Encounter. Finally, they found the perfect place, Plymouth, to build their homes. In that first winter in America, over half of the Pilgrims died. They buried the dead at night, many in the same graves, so the Indians would not know of their losses. The Pilgrims are said to have stepped from the boat onto a big rock. They called it Plymouth Rock. Today, that rock is under a big monument at Plymouth, Massachusetts, where you can go and listen to the history of the Mayflower. The year is even carved on it. There's also a village made just like the Plymouth colony used to be.